Every time I think of you, I always catch my breath, and I'm still standing here, and you're miles away, and I wonder why you left. And there's a storm that's raging through my frozen heart tonight. I hear your name in certain circles, and it always makes me smile. I spend my time just thinking about you, and it's almost driving me wild. But it's my heart that's breaking down this long distance line tonight, and I ain't missing you at all. Since you've been called away, I ain't missing you. No matter what I might say, there's a message in the wires, and I'm sending you a signal tonight. You don't know how desperate I've become, and it looks like I'm losing this fight. But it's my heart that's breaking down this long dusty road of mine, and I ain't missing you at all. Since you've been gone away, I ain't missing you.
Every man wants to know his life matters. Call it the search for significance, the quest for meaning, the drive to leave a legacy. We want to know our life counts today and tomorrow. And yet, the horrible truth is, most men don't leave a lasting impact. Within a few short years, their long hours of work, financial savings, and material possessions are gone and forgotten. Time sweeps away everything. But there is another way to live, a life of impact, both now and for eternity. A way to press into the full life, the life you were meant to lead. Join us at the PK Men's Conference as we uncover the truth and the way to lead a life of fullness, both now and for eternity. Join us as we press into the full life.
It's interesting. As a pastor, when you're preaching on something, you kind of live it, right? And this doesn't mean I've been like taking the bones of animals and beating people to death with them, okay? But there is some relevance to that. Today, just a little forecast. Today is going to be a very violent sermon, and I don't mean that I'm going to be violent. I'm just going to be the topic of discussion today is going to be very violent because it is a violent exchange. And it's by a person who is extremely violent. And there's going to be talks today a lot about vengeance and back and forth and the kind of cycle people get in when someone hurts you and you hurt them back, and then they hurt you again, and then you hurt, and it kind of escalates. There's actually pockets of the world right now where people are killing each other, and they can't really remember what the original offense was. They've just been doing it so long that they continue to hurt each other, and there's this kind of cycle of vengeance. And it's worth asking the question every time that you're angry at someone, if I act on this anger, and then they act back, and then I act again, where does that cycle end? Because the trap for us when we're angry people is that perpetually it will get worse until the anger will consume us. A great scholar once said said, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And emotion is very much like that. And there are people that I've encountered in my life, and I have to say there's real family history of this, where anger is their get-out-of-jail-free card. It's their default. It's their reaction. They can go from here to here in a matter of milliseconds. And they use anger. Maybe it's an explosive anger. Maybe it's a passive-aggressive anger, and they control people around them. Sometimes parents can do this, where you kind of have that manipulative guilt trip you put on your kids, or you have that dominance, or you break them over and over and over again, and they grow up and then they move away and they never visit. Sometimes it's the most painful thing to see. Someone, I encounter this at funerals, where someone said, like their parent has passed away, and they're so conflicted because their past with that parent had involved so much anger that there was so much that was never said or made right. And that person goes to the grave, and and they're left in this kind of cycle. So we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about the idea of what we call sovereignty. Sovereignty is the idea that behind this universe, behind everything that happens, behind all the occurrences around us, there is an overwhelming purpose driving the narrative of what humanity stands for and is a part of. This grand narrative has a part to play for each and every human being. In fact, we all yearn to be part of this narrative, really, if you think about it. Why do we go to movies and watch the hero and watch the happy ending? Why do we go to movies where people overcome huge adversity and then survive? Why does that inspire us over and over and over again? Because this is the tale of the human race. And this is the story that God has placed in our hearts. And Samson, who we're going to talk about today, is going to represent someone who is, in a sense, part of that sovereign message, but really in a way that he doesn't have, how do I say it? He's not somebody that everybody's going to miss when he's gone. He's going to play a part in this role, even though he is not a contributor to a sense of where he is leading people back towards where they need to go. He's a horrible example. He's a very immoral man, but he's also very violent. And I consider this time, and the verse that describes this time is from the book of Judges. It says this so many times in the book of Judges because it wants to know the context, that there is a verse in that book in the Bible that sums up, it is this: in those days Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. There should be a slide for it. Yeah, everybody did as he saw fit. And basically what that meant was people acted as their own sovereigns. They said, you cannot control me, I can do whatever I want. And so people basically lived according to their own passion. And this created an incredibly violent, chaotic society. And into the society was born a man named Samson. His parents had heard from God that Samson was going to be someone who helped deliver the Israelites from the bondage they were experienced at that point. Israel at this point is scattered around in 12 tribes. And kind of around this area and sometimes inside it, there were different races of people, mostly city-states. And the one that affects this portion of the book of Judges was people known as the Philistines. There's some kind of discussion about where these people originated from. Some think Crete, some from Egypt, some from the Phoenicians. But this is a very warlike tribe. They were leading-edge bronze warriors. They had incredible armor, they had incredible forts, and they were a force to be reckoned with. And regularly, the Jewish people who at that time, who were farmers, these Philistines would come out of their cities and would just basically go and take anything they want to take, kill anybody they wanted to kill, and do whatever they wanted to do, and then go back to their cities. And the people of Israel were at this time experiencing the pressure of this. And so God told his parents they were going to have a son named Samson. And Samson was going to be a special child. Now, they raised him as a Nazarite. Nazarite had three things. One, and Nazarites were kind of like, I don't know what we call them. They'd be like today a monk or holy person, okay? It didn't mean they were a religious figure in a pastoral sense. It meant they were a religious figure in their bodies and their lives were set apart to demonstrate God's holiness. So Samson was a Nazarite, and there were 3 basic rules to the Nazarites. 1, you never cut your hair. 2, you never touch a dead body. And 3, you never drink alcohol or anything from grapes. And in that society, that was a big sacrifice because you basically had water or wine. That was all you had to drink. And Samson was raised this way. So you imagine he had this long flowing hair and this long beard, and he was raised this way. But as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, and you can see them online on YouTube, Samson was someone who wasn't scared to break the rules. There's a point where he touches a dead lion, and it really violates his Nazarite vow. And his demonstration of the way he acts really brings this to place. And just a little map we got. This is basically kind of what's happening in the area. Basically, the Israelites are up there. The Philistines are down there. Ekron is one of their main cities. The Philistines basically had 5 cities. Each one had a king. And these 5 cities were like military forts. And as you can see, this valley, so the Philistines would come down the valley, come back up, and take whatever they wanted. All right, next slide. So let's start in Judges chapter 15. This is Samson. Last week we did the lion, the snitch, and the wardrobe. And we talked about Samson's marriage, which was a disaster. And at the end of that chapter, when Samson lost his bet in his riddle, he went home. Now, wedding ceremonies in those days were about a week long. You think your wedding was long, okay? They were often a week long. And there was a lot of partying, all those kind of things. Samson was he was actually on the 7th day of the feast, which means if he had lasted that whole day and gone through all the process, his wife and him would have been together at the end. But what he did after he lost the riddles, he went home and pouted. He basically walked away from his marriage. So what happened to his wife? She ended up marrying the best man. You can't make this stuff up. Like, it's incredible. That's why you should never trust the best man at any wedding. I'm just saying. You've got to watch that guy because he's a stand-in. So this is what happened a little bit later. Time goes on. Later on, during the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat as a present to his wife. He said, I'm going into my wife's room to sleep with her. But her father wouldn't let him in. Awkward situation, okay, here. Because Samson is acting like she's still his wife, even though he walked away from the end of the wedding. I truly thought you must hate her, father explained, so I gave her in marriage to your best man. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she is. Marry her instead, okay? First of all, a couple of questions, okay? When I mess up at home, sometimes a gift is a good idea, right? You know, like with the guys, you know, sometimes, like with my boys, if we have a major conflict, ice cream cures everything. Really does, yeah. Once in a while, the boys are having a rough day, and there's kind of words exchanged in that, and they go into the rooms, and my wife and I'll go get a bowl of ice cream, open the door a crack, push it in the room, and then close it quickly. It's amazing. That warms up just the relationship, you know, all this kind of thing. Apparently, in Samson's world, the makeup gift was a young goat. Don't ask me. I don't know. I mean, is that a romantic exchange or what? Here, I got you this goat. You know, everything should be okay right now, right? Maybe it was. I don't know. So his father-in-law breaks the news to him that she's now married to someone else, and so he offers her younger sister. This poor girl, who knew? She got up in the morning, she washed her hair, it was going to go about all her day, and then all of a sudden this big hairy man comes in, and your father says, "You want to marry her?" You know, she wasn't asked or anything like that. It was kind of a horrible situation. But Samson declined. Samson said, "This time around I cannot be blamed for everything I'm going to do to you Philistines." And then he went out and caught 300 foxes. He tied their tails together in pairs, and he fastened a torch to each pair of tails. Then he lit the torches and let the foxes run through the grain fields of the Philistines. He burned all their grain to the ground, including the sheaves and uncut grain. He also destroyed their vineyards and olive groves. Okay, a couple of things here. Because this bears some explanation, okay? Right? We'll talk about vengeance in a minute. I'm just going to explain the context a little bit. Okay? To the Philistines, their principal god was Dagon. That's what they call him. Kind of a cool name. Okay? And Dagon means grain. So to the Philistines, their chief god was the one who provided their crops. So what Samson's going to do is incredibly damaging not only to their crops, but to their psyche. I can talk. I just had a lot of coffee, and whoever made those brownies, that's a real buzz. Thank you for that. Okay? Now, foxes in Israel at the time were not like our red foxes. Okay? They're actually small. They were kind of sandy colored. They're smaller. They have really big ears. Okay? And contrary to what people would believe, foxes are actually fairly easy to catch. All you need is some raw meat and a trap. Okay? That said, this could not have been an easy thing to do. Okay? Generally, animals do not like it when you tie their tails together. Okay? Generally, animals also do not like pyrotechnics. Okay? And so these poor things, the foxes in that culture, they're only about 6 pounds, would have been doing what naturally foxes or animals did. They tried to find a place to hide. And so they would be drawn to the kind of dark recesses of grain fields. And so when he did this, and how he caught 300, I don't know. It sounds like mythology, but it actually can be done. And I imagine this took some time. And this is a pretty supernatural human being, okay? So I imagine it could be done. But this is absolutely destructive to the Philistines when he does this. Now, a couple things. One is this a proportional response to the fact that his wife married his best man? Probably not. So let's ask some questions around revenge here, okay, and vengeance. 5 considerations that Samson maybe should have sat down. Do I clearly understand both sides? Samson did not understand both sides, or at least made no effort to. Second thing, are there any behind-the-scenes circumstances? Okay, do I bear some of the responsibility in this? These are questions we should think about before we respond to someone or before we hurt someone back. Right? Next one. How much vengeance is appropriate? Like how committed are you to this? Because it's not going to end with you just hitting them back. Right? And not only that, what is a proportional response to what they did? Often we make it way more than it is. And sometimes justice needs to be done. Sometimes you have to sit down with people and work things out, or you have to advocate for yourself. I'm for all those things. But often the vindictiveness that goes behind vengeance often just leads to a cycle of violence, as we're going to see. Am I setting off a cycle of vengeance? Good question. Good question. The response to acting in anger often is done without consideration of the consequences of what your anger will bring about. And this is really, really important. When you are about to hurt somebody, or you're about to hit them back, or you're about to do that, ask the question, how committed am I? Is this really a big deal? I've told you guys before about my mother's father. My grandfather was a very horrible man. He was an alcoholic all his life, extremely abusive. I remember his funeral in Bracebridge. And I'll always love that Anglican minister for pulling this off. The only 2 good things he could say about my grandfather was he liked to get outdoors and he liked to hunt and fish. That was the nicest thing you could say about him. He was a bitter, hurtful man. He was not only vindictive, he was vindictive to the point that he would cross the country to hurt somebody, particularly those who were closest to him. It included his wife, my mother, his kids. He was just an awful man. And he was in his 80s, and he hated my Uncle Larry. Uncle Larry married my Aunt Phyllis. He passed away a couple of years ago. Dutch farmer, just great guy. Knew everything about politics, apparently. He could sit down with me and tell me all about politics. Talk for hours. He hated him because when the first time he picked up my Aunt Phyllis, he parked in the driveway rather than on the road. So my grandfather's 85 years old going, Harry, He parked in the driveway instead of the road, stupid guy. And he remembered that and hated him his whole life. I think it was like 60 years later. Hated him for that. That's what anger and violence, the response often is. Am I setting off a cycle of violence? Am I smarter than an all-knowing, all-powerful God? This is a biggie. There's a verse in Romans, and it actually says this in the Old Testament too. God says, it is mine to avenge. Don't take revenge on people. It is mine to avenge. And if we think about it, we think, if a wrong has been done to me, who's better at evening the playing field or responding to it, me or God? See, the arrogance of me thinking that I know more than God and I can do more is often a trap that people fall into. They take matters into their own hands and they become judge, jury, and executioner. And so they hurt others back. And instead of going, God, I'm going to ask you to intervene in this situation, or I'm going to turn my anger over to you, instead they hurt back. Now, notice I said, I'm not saying there aren't circumstances where confrontation, where forgiveness, where things have to be worked out. We need to talk to each other. And the more we talk to each other, the more difficult it can become. There's sometimes the best thing in your life is to have someone, a brother or sister, to sit down with you and go, you are doing this, it's destructive, it needs to stop. You're on a very bad road. And that's a loving thing to do. We sometimes misinterpret that as anger. That's not anger, that's love. Love expressed it in a way. And not all anger is evil. There are things that should make us angry. You know, I've talked about, there's injustices in our society that we take so much for granted. You know, like, why is it interest rates are 1.5% or 1% and credit card companies charge us 30% interest? Like, really, if somebody implemented that in a day, there'd be riots in the street. But because it's always been that way, just take it for granted and never ask the question. When they set those interest rates were often 17, 18%. But they stayed up and interest rates went down. And there's so many people that are tied to credit card debt, some of you that are trapped in this cycle of debt. And the credit card companies, really, I know we get into debt and we need to take responsibility for it and we need to work on it, but the question needs to be, in our society should be, how is that fair? Somebody in power needs to stand up and say, this is wrong, and correct it. And that's one of so many ills that are in our society. Those things should make us angry. Child slavery should make us angry. Child prostitution in the world should make us angry. Genocide should make us angry. Those are angers that need to be utilized and properly responded to in a good, godly way. But the anger of hitting back, the anger of the petty revenge, as Samson's going to demonstrate, is really showing that he thinks he knows what to do. And the more he thinks he knows what to do, the worse the situation gets. So let's continue. Who did this, the Philistines demand? This is in response to the fox fire thing. Okay? Who did this, the Philistines demanded? Samson was the reply, because his father-in-law from Timnah gave Samson's wife to be married to his best man. Now, here's a response by the Philistines, okay? The cycle, you can see it's improving. So the Philistines went and got the woman and her father, and he burned them to death. Philistines were really into fire, okay? And because fire was used on them at this point, they said, you want to use fire on us? We'll use fire on you. And so they thought this was a great idea. We'll have a barbecue. And unfortunately, Samson's wife and his former wife and his father-in-law were burned to death. You imagine the best man after this? This has been the weirdest wedding I've ever been a part of. I kind of went in as the best man. I got a new set of clothes. I got a new wife. It's kind of a switch. I think everything's going good. Then the guys come and take her, and they go and barbecue her. I'm getting out of this situation. You know, that's just not normal, right? Okay? Because you did this, so Samson hears about it. Samson vowed, I won't rest until I take my revenge upon you. The cycle of vengeance is improving. So he attacked the Philistines with great fury and killed many of them. Then he went to live in a cave in the rock of Etam. Okay, do I have a map, the next slide? I think I do. Yeah, okay. You see that hole up in the top of the picture there? That's a rock of Etam. Okay? Now, here's what will happen sometimes when people get in cycles of violence. You get hit, you hit back, you get hit, you hit back, then you run away. This is what Samson does. This is deep into Israelite territory, okay? So, in response to his wife and his former wife and his father-in-law getting burned to death, Samson attacks the Philistines. He is super strong, and he kills a whole bunch of them, all right? And then he goes, okay, I'm done, and he walks away and hides. Duck and cover. Drop it. Now everything's good, right? Thinking that as he hides in this cave or he sits in and you may ask why, he's super strong. I think Samson saw the escalation get out of control and then finally said, I got to get out of this situation. And so he ran away. Here's the thing. Once you start a cycle of violence, running away doesn't solve it. It just festers in the hearts of the people that you've hurt. And so sometimes people, they'll get into these exchanges and then they'll go, okay, I'm done, I'm walking away. Do what you want. And somehow think that makes things right. It doesn't. Samson's battle with the Philistines is only going to get bigger. Now, I want you to understand something about this. God is using Samson to punish the Philistines. He's using Samson to transfer their aggression from the people of Israel onto this one man. Because, as I said last week, Samson isn't the leader of an army. Samson is the army. And so this is actually going to last, his judgeship or his role in this is going to last for 20 years. He was not a flash in the pan. This is going to go on for some time. Okay? But at this point, Samson runs and hides in this cave, the cave to Etam. Okay, let's go on to the next passage. Oh, two emotions that take strong men down. The first one, Samson burned with anger. He allowed his anger to control him. And we have an example from last week's message. The idea of burning with anger. Went down to Ascalon. Burned with anger, he went up to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his friend who attended. Second thing, Samson was filled with pride. Eventually, he's going to look at these things and he's going to say, I did this. He's not going to give God the credit for his strength. And that's going to come to bite him next week. Let's go on to the next passage. The Philistines retaliated by setting up camp in Judah and spreading out near the town of Lehi. The men of Judah asked the Philistines, why are you attacking us? Okay, quite literally. You're talking about that valley there. All of a sudden, the Philistines bring an army out. And they set up camp. Why did they set up camp? Well, it's normally a precursor, a warning that we're going to come and fight you. Basically, you get all the soldiers out. They get all their stuff together. They're wearing their armor. They move in really close to you, and they start playing chicken with you. Okay? It's a very threatening move. 3,000 Philistines, fully armored, was a major, major problem for the people of Judah, who tended to be farmers and not armed. The Philistines replied, we've come to capture Samson. We'll come to pay him back for what he did to us. This cycle of violence is going to continue. So 3,000 men of Judah went down to get Samson at the cave in the rock of Etam. Can you imagine this? You've got 3,000 of his own people. And he's not from the same tribe. He's from Dan. But Dan and Judah were kind of right next to each other, and there was a lot of interaction between them. This guy's such a pain in the butt that the Judites just wanted to get rid of him. They didn't look at him as a hero. They didn't look at him as a deliverer. They looked at him as a pain because of this escalation that they wanted no part in. They said to Samson, don't you realize that the Philistines rule over us? What are you doing to us? But Samson replied, I only did to them what they did to me. Isn't that the warning you ever get? That's called a deflection. You'll say, why did you do this to me? Because you did this. Or, I'm just so fed up with things that I had to do something. Or I had to speak up for myself. Or, I had to get even. Or, I was justified in my cause. That's a major deflection whenever you ask somebody about something they've done that's wrong. Because I don't like to be accused of being wrong. Nobody does. Nobody likes to be accused of having a fault. And so when we confront people, often the reaction is, well, the reason I'm doing this is your problem. It's something you're doing. And we deflect it back. So the Judites are going to, Samson, what do you got yourself into, man? This is a bad situation. What are you doing stirring these people up? And his response, why? Why are they upset? I just did to them what they did to me. Right? It's just deflected off. Okay, next. But the men of Judah told him, we have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. Okay, notice they ask. Right? This guy has superhuman strength. And so there's 3,000 of them. But they were in enough doubt of his ability that they, thought they maybe better let him know. Is anybody cold? A little chilly in here, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, everybody stand up. All right? Do some turns. Do some turns. Do some turns. Loosen up. Do some turns. Stretch, 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 stretch. Stretch. Okay, rotate those arms around. Rotate them around. Okay, do it the other way. Do it the other way. Shake your head. Loosen it up. Loosen up your hands. Let it go. Okay, sit down. That way I can get 10 more minutes of attention out of you, okay? All right, Samson said, but promise that you won't kill me yourselves. We will only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines, they replied. We won't kill you. So they made a vow with them. And normally you could trust when somebody did that. So they tied him up with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. New ropes tended to be really strong, very stiff, and hard to break out of. Okay? They didn't tie him up with ropes that had been lying around in the yard for a few years. Okay? They got new stuff. So they're going, okay, we know he's super strong, but there's no way he can break out of these things. Okay? As Samson arrived at Lehi, the Philistines came shouting in triumph. But the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, and he snapped the ropes on his arms as if they were burnt strands of flax. What's flax? Anybody know? I don't know. Yeah? I don't know. Just like, thing. Yeah, just like spaghetti. Broke them like, let's say spaghetti. Cultural change here. Not flax, spaghetti. He broke them like they were loose, limp, boiled over your mother's twice boiled spaghetti. Okay? And they fell from his wrist. Then he found the jawbone of a recently killed donkey, and he picked it up and killed 1,000 Philistines with it. Okay. Jawbone of a donkey about that big. Okay? And a recently killed donkey. I don't know what this donkey did to deserve this death, this untimely death, but he probably deserved it. Okay? If you ever encountered donkeys, they're incredibly stubborn, very difficult beasts. That's what I know about them. Okay. He killed 1,000 Philistines with this. So it's basically a slaughter. And then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, I've piled them in heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. When he finished his boasting, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was known as Job Home. Thank you. Next slide. Samson was now very thirsty, and he cried out to the Lord, you have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans? Now, this is really interesting. He brags, and then he realizes he's thirsty, and there's nothing he can do about it. So this is significant. This is the first time we hear Samson talking to God. And he cries out to God. He's still kind of claiming the great strength, like it's his idea, okay? But he's recognizing he needs God's help. Must I now die of thirst and fall in the hands of these pagans? So the Philistines, who he's just killed 1,000, are basically beat up and on the run. But if he were to fall down there of thirst, they would come back, right? So he doesn't want that situation to happen. So God caused water to gush out of a hollow in the ground at Lehi, and Samson was revived as he drank. Then he named the place the Spring of the One who cried out, and it's still in Lehi to this day. Samson judged Israel for 20 years during the period which the Philistines dominated the land. Now next week, it actually jumps ahead 20 years. But this is where this stalemate is left. We have Samson, who has caused an enormous amount of damage to the Philistines. They have an enormous amount of animosity towards him, but they don't know what to do. It's a catch-22. They can't beat this guy. They can't trick him. They can't kill him with military might. They can't get his own people to kill him. It's a stalemate. So basically for 20 years, because of the threat of this one individual, the Philistines stay home. But, as we're going to find out next week, Samson will not let well enough alone. And he's going to start, at the end of those 20 years, or during that time, he's going to start wandering down into the Philistine communities and causing difficulty there. And it's going to bring about this cycle of violence and the escalation of that. So just a couple of things to consider, and then we're going to take questions in a couple of minutes, but just a couple of things to consider. How aware was Samson that his great strength was from God? At this point, I'm not sure he knew it was from God. He might have just thought he was special. You know, you have talents. You and I have talents. We all have talents. And sometimes we treat our time, our talents, and resources like it's just ours. You know, that's my talent. It's to make me better. But in reality, as a follower of Jesus Christ, I've been taught that we are what we call stewards of our time, talents, and resources. And by that, what I mean is God gives them to us, and there'll be a time when we give them back. Samson had lost this message. God had given him a tremendous gift. He was a one-man army. He was super strong. But he failed to appreciate where that came from, or that it was temporary. He treated it like it was always going to be that way. And it seems like he wasn't aware. And I guess the question for us is, what are you holding on to, or what are you gifted with, and how are you looking at it? Are you looking at it as an opportunity to worship God through it? Or are you looking at it as an opportunity to put yourself forward? Okay? Here's the thing. We can go through life as an instrument of God's grace and mercy and path, or as someone who's so endued with a sense of the presence of God through us. I consider this the difference between being a tool and a treasure. Of all the judges, most of them, when they passed away, they were forgettable. People kind of went on. But the last judge was a man named Samuel. Samuel was the best of the judges. He was a tremendous judge. He led God's people. He worshiped God wholeheartedly. He lived to a ripe old age. He showed people and taught them about God. And it said when Samuel died, all Israel mourned because they missed him. Why? Because he was a treasure. Samson is a tool. Samson's a blunt instrument. God loves him. He cares about him. But so much of what Samson's going to do and the actions he's going to take are going to be basically God working through him and in spite of him. He's going to forward the narrative of God's story, but not be an active participant in it as far as his heart belonging to God and his desire to live in holiness with God. There's a vast difference. And as I look at my life, am I going to ask the question, am I a treasure or tool? I know there's some mornings I get up and I know I'm a total tool. And you probably do too, right? But how do I become a treasure? How do I become a treasure? That's what we're going to be asking ourselves in the next couple of weeks. Second thing, did Samson realize the extent that God was behind his successes? You know, did he separate the two, his talents? Next one. Did Samson ever think he might be limiting the potential God saw in him? You know, did he ever ask and say, what if I love God with all my heart and I had this talent? Like, think of the potential. This is a one-man army. Never once do we hear him going to the Israelites and saying, God has given me this gift. He's given us this gift. We can be delivered from our people. So let's go to battle and I'll be the first one in. He never inspired anybody that way. He did these tremendous things. Nobody could deny he was special. Yet his situation is always going to be between him and other people. He's never going to be what we would call a team guy. Last one, are there times I'm just like Samson? You know, am I living my own narrative in my own life in such a selfish way that I'm making myself the hero, the beneficiary, you know, all those kind of things? There's something Jesus once said to his followers. He said, if you want to gain your life, you have to lose it. Christianity, like being a follower of Christ, is about so many opposites. If you want to lead, serve. If you want to gain, give. If you want to be first, be last. If you want to enter the kingdom, this glorious kingdom, go in as a child. There's so many contradictory messages in being a follower of Jesus Christ, as far as the way up is down. Samson never brings about the humility until the absolute last to recognize where his strength came from. And man, that would be a wasted life for all of us. It really would. Last slide. If you let your need drive you to God, God will meet your deepest needs. Samson, the one beautiful thing in today's message is that Samson reached out to God when he recognized he had need. This is going to be a catalyst. There's going to come a situation down the road where this prayer is going to be remembered, it's going to be repeated, and God is going to do a tremendous miracle through him. But it's going to come at a horrible price. And that's next week. We're going to be talking about 3 close shaves and a haircut. Pretty title, eh? So, I'm just going to ask the baskets to go around. We have outies and innies. The outies are the ones you take stuff out. The innies are the ones you put stuff in. Thank you for your offering. It helps us do what we have to do here, and God bless you for doing that. I just want to update. Our spring was really bumpy. Well, we just had a great summer. So thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your faithfulness. Oh, supporting your church is the one charity you support that comes back and blesses you. But we don't give to a church. We give to God. And we honor him with that. So as you continue to do that, I wanted to just give you an update and say thank you. You've been doing really good in this department. So thank you, folks. While we're doing that, I just have a trailer for our next series. I'll ask the worship team to come up, and then I'll have a couple minutes for questions. Jeremy, would you be able to be the mic guy for me today? Just turn it on for him, Chris. All right, just show this trailer, and then we'll take it.
They know where you live. They feed on your flaws. They drain your time. And they never leave you alone.
Hey, I need to run a few errands. Can you watch my dog? Again?